Imagine yourself at a solemn funeral. A flag-draped casket stands amid proud ranks, the breeze holding its breath in reverent stillness. Suddenly, an officer slips forward, draws his weapon with a defiant glare, poised to fire. Just a few steps away, a commanding figure calmly rests a bare hand on the casket's lid, standing motionless, as if daring him. No warning shot, no prior tremor, only that electric pause. Then a thunderous "freeze" that rips the silence apart. Those 11 seconds of footage stunned an entire nation and forced everyone to ask, is there a power more formidable than a gun barrel? To follow the heart-pounding journey from attempted murder to the daring rescue, and discover how this extraordinary silence forever reshaped our understanding of authority. Hit subscribe now and ring the bell. You won't want to miss the next thrilling chapter. The final trumpet call still echoed through the air when a sudden wave of violence erupted in the midst of the solemn ranks. Captain Daniel Rivers, face twisted in rage and contempt, lunged straight into the heart of the funeral, sneering a racist insult. "You black scum don't deserve this honor." In that tear-stained moment, the gun seemed ready to blast through the silent sky, its barrel aimed directly at the uniformed soldier. Eyes cold with murderous intent, the mourners snapped to attention, breaths caught in their throats. But before anyone could react, a Secret Service agent hidden among the guests sprang up like a bullet. In the blink of an eye, he slammed Rivers to the ground and decisively disarmed him. The clatter of metal on earth rang out like an unannounced verdict, Rivers' murderous glare vanishing before he could scream. Standing just yards away was General Frederick Dalton, a living legend who had led the century's greatest hostage rescue mission. His calm, unflinching gaze, even under the threat of that raised weapon, burned itself into everyone's memory. That instant was more than a timely intervention. It raised the shattering question: would you have the courage to fall on the bayonet to defend the honor of your flag and uniform? What had been a quiet ceremony, with crisp uniforms and a flag-draped casket, transformed into a whirl of whispered panic and frightened stares. A mourning ribbon slipped free, fluttering as if mourning the shattered peace. The guards bit back their emotions, fingers clutching rifles. Yet none dared move beyond stunned silence in the face of such resolute action. The scene laid bare a stark contrast: violence versus composure, fury versus stillness, arrogance versus résilience. No alarm sounded. Only the swift, sure move of security and the general's unwavering eyes. This shocking incident was not only the spark for events to follow, but also a vivid testament to the absolute power of silencia language, potent enough to deflect every bullet and dispel every hatred. Immediately after that decisive intervention, the funeral grounds became more sacred and hushed than ever before. The cemetery stretched out in rows of immaculate white headstones, among which Lieutenant Commander Cassandra H. Reed's marker stood out, its letters etched in blood, read upon a smooth slab of polished granite. Each painstakingly carved stroke seemed to echo a reminder of her ultimate sacrifice. Adding to the solemnity of the scene, around them, a gentle breeze swept by, carrying the whispered farewells of the mourner son, almost delicate sound, yet charged with emotion, like a collective sigh bidding a comrade goodbye. Amid all this stillness, Colonel Henry Wallace's figure rose like a stone statue. He stood motionless beside the flag-draped casket, his bare hand resting lightly on the folds of the flag, his gaze unwavering. It was as though every personal feeling had been tucked behind that impassive expression, reserved in full for this moment of tribute. His presence carved out a distinct pocket of silence, separate from the soft sobs or the occasional choked gasp. The honor guard and the ceremonial unit stood rigid like relief carvings, no one daring to move or speak, as if to preserve a solemn vow to the fallen officer. This was more than a display of discipline. It conveyed a message of loyalty and a celebration of honor. Every crisp cap, every gleaming star on a shoulder, pointed to one symbol alone, the dedication of an officer laid to rest forever here. Even family and fellow soldiers, no matter how deep their grief, hesitated to cross the unspoken boundary he had drawn, understanding that this space belonged solely to duty, respect, and an undying farewell to their comrade. The funeral transformed into a ceremony that blended grief with the power of silence. There were no raucous wails or booming prayers, only ragged breaths and eyes fixed on the headstone. In that moment of collective stillness, every grudge and anger melted away, giving way to profound reverence, and the image of Colonel Wallace, steadfast and unyielding, became more than a testament to personal strength. It awakened in everyone a sense of the ultimate line in the sand, the sanctity of a funeral where only honor and homage endure. The moment the hush of remembrance still hung in the air, lingering incense smoke, and the fading notes of the honor guard's bugly, a figure clad in crisp blue, appeared at the edge of the service. Captain Vincent Cross stepped into the sea of white headstones so quietly that no one registered his arrival. Though his name had not been on the roster, that very morning, an unexpected shift swap had placed him here, trading with another officer for reasons never questioned. And just like that, he found himself amid the mourners, poised for a confrontation only he and his intended target fully understood. No one batted an eye at the missing officer after all. The funeral of a fallen Navy lieutenant, however solemn, wasn't designated a high-security event. Cross moved deliberately among the gravestones, tension etched into every measured step, his gaze, sharp and burning, locked onto the unmoving general at the flag-draped casket. What the crowd saw was calm ritual. What Cross saw was a gauntlet thrown down. He needed to prove something both to the world and to himself, that this calm could be shattered. His hand flexed at his side, fingers brushing the seam of his jacket as though testing the weight of the weapon concealed within. Sweat beaded at his temples. Yet he did not draw. This was not a spur-of-the-moment outburst, but a meticulously planned act of retribution. Years of resentment, seeded in the sands of Kandahar, had borne fruit in this silent, loaded step toward judgment. Across the lawn, the general remained statuesque, a lone sentinel of discipline. His stillness was the greatest provocation. If Cross dared raise his pistol, 11 seconds of terror and defiance would be broadcast nationwide. But that only fueled Cross further. This was his crucible. The moment to confront the man whose very composure incensed him more than any shouted insult or drawn blade. With each careful footfall, Cross closed the distance, yet never broke the trance of ceremony. He weaved among rows of mourners and honor guards, moving like a man owing a debt only he knew the balance of. In his mind, this ritual was no longer a ceremony of mourning, but a trial by fire, an opportunity to validate his own code of honor, unseen by the others. The two men were locked in a silent duel of wills. For Cross, the funeral was no longer about loss or protocol. It was the ultimate test of courage, and as the sky darkened with the weight of expectation, he readied himself to strike, confident that, in that final, decisive moment, all eyes would be on him and on the shattered stillness he would unleash. Immediately after Cross's heavy footsteps, the air seemed to solidify. Wallace, calm as ever, stepped quietly to the flag-draped casket, every eye locked onto him, as if spellbound, when he bowed his head ever so slightly and then slowly laid his bare hand upon the funeral cloth. That moment carried no pomp of a final farewell, rather, it rang as an unyielding declaration. I stand ready to face any danger. Wallace's rough hand touched the fabric, and the sacred ground itself seemed to freeze. Suddenly, Cross's roar shattered the solemnity. You? Who are you? Hands up or I'll blow your brains out. His shout ripped through the honor guard like a blade. Dragging the funeral into a waking nightmare, Cross lunged forward, gun already freed from its holster. the bulky magazine pressing at his hip. His finger trembled on the trigger, poised to fire at any instant, yet Wallace did not flinch. He stood motionless, eyes ice-cold, the slanting sunset casting his silhouette against rows of white headstones like a statue amid the tension. The wind whispered through the trees as if to remind, "This place belongs to discipline, not chaos." The honor guard remained rigid, rifles held at chest, every heartbeat echoing in the charged silence. Cross snarled, "You think you're somebody, strutting here and trampling U.S. soldiers' honor?" His words dripped with hatred, revealing the burning vendetta within. Wallace shrugged, as if Cross's fury were nothing more than a passing breeze, then inclined his head lower and said in a low, steady voice, "I'm the man who won't let true authority be shaken by a trigger pull." The cemetery fell utterly silent, broken only by Cross's ragged breathing and Wallace's steady pulse. Cross sneered, tongue curling. "Silent authority? I'll show you silence can't save lives." He squeezed the trigger guard along the barrel, but before he could fire, several agents hidden behind the mourners sprang forward. Wrestling Cross out of his stance, the gun clattered from his hand, and the cemetery erupted in stunned gasps while Wallace remained unyielding, hand on casket, voice unmoved. His resolute silence seared into every witness's memory. To destroy that power, one must act, not shoot. Continuing from that explosive moment, both the honor guard and the assembled civilians froze in a suffocating standoff. A savage roar escaped Cross's lips as his trembling hand clenched the pistol, its barrel pressing directly against Wallace's back. The faint click of the weapon's stock against his holster was like a death knell in the heavy silence. Every breath seemed to stop, and each heartbeat thundered in everyone's chest. Wallace remained statue still, shoulders squared, and simply lifted his right shoulder in the slightest, a nearly imperceptible signal to the young soldier at his side. The recruit drew his own weapon, hand coiled in instinct to shield his commander. Yet with a single, effortless lean, Wallace extinguished that reflex, his unblinking gaze locked onto the soldier's wide eyes, his expression utterly unreadable, silent warning that no one must move. The ceremonial buglers held their instruments at rest. The honor guard stood like carved reliefs. Cross advanced one step, then another, until his pistol nearly brushed Wallace's uniform. He bellowed, "Drop the weapon! Do you understand that threatening me is threatening this entire army?" Tension peaked as the muzzle quivered inches from Wallace's shoulder. It would have taken only a single shot for everything to collapse. Yet Wallace stood unmoved, returning only a steady stare. His silence became a fortress, a wall of unyielding resolve stronger than any barrier of steel. The honor guard dared not breathe. The soft whisper of the wind across the manicured lawn sounded like the collective exhale of military history. Every footstep echoed with the dread of an armed man isolated among the grieving. Families of the fallen turned their faces away, unwilling to witness the gun to their hero's back, but subconsciously they bore witness to perhaps the most harrowing moment of their lives. Violence confronted by unwavering stillness. Finally, Cross halted, his arm shaking, the pistol's weight burdening him. In his eyes flickered a silent plea, unspoken recognition of defeat. The ground itself seemed to yield under the pressure of discipline and shared reverence. Wallace's unbroken calm forced Cross to hesitate, to realize that brute force could not bow a dignity built on ritual and collective honor. No gunshot rang out. No final cry pierced the air, only a lone aggressor quelled by the all-encompassing hush of the cemetery. In that quiet, true authority prevailed without a single bullet. A triumph of military discipline and the power of unshakable composure. A soft beep rang out from beneath the row of chairs. like a warning bell announcing a dramatic turning point. The entire funeral ground fell silent as a security captain bent down, rummaged, and retrieved a mini recording device long hidden under the seat's fabric. His eyes flickered as he activated it. And from the tiny speaker came a calm yet cutting voice. "If he shows up, he'll act. Just stand still and let the tension consume him." Oh. The recording, crystal clear in the hushed space, sliced through the charade like a knife. Cross, still clutching his weapon, stared in shock at the device. In an instant, his arrogance turned to disorientation. He growled, "No, this is dirty. You're staging this to ruin my reputation." But his accusations met only the soldiers' steely gazes and the stunned murmurs of civilians. Everyone realized this was not a face-to-face confrontation, but a psychological trap meticulously set in advance. Under Colonel Wallace' silent command, the young soldiers moved in unison. One circled behind Cross and deftly pried the gun from its holster, while another snapped Cross's wrist, twisting it just enough to dislodge the trigger. The metal shell clattered onto the ground with a harsh clack. Cross lost his balance, mouth agape, eyes flickering with panic and betrayal. He clutched at the air, trying to reclaim his weapon, but security forces had locked onto his right arm. In a flash, the gun slipped from Cross's grasp and fell silently as the joint lock was applied, forcing him to his knees. No shots were fired, yet Cross's authority evaporated completely. The crowd broke into a light applausonat in celebration. But as a collective exhale after a suffocating moment, civilians, soldiers, and even the fallen officer's grieving family standing nearby understood true strength isn't in a weapon, but in compelling the aggressor to disarm. As the solemn atmosphere returned, the breeze gently stirred the flag draped over the casket, casting an almost otherworldly aura. The recording device still glinted in the security captain's hand, a testament to a scheme exposed, and by the casket, Colonel Wallace remained motionless, offering a single nod as if acknowledging the outcome of a battle fought without gunfire, where silence and discipline emerged victorious. That very night, an 11-second clip exploded across television networks and social media, capturing the moment when Vincent Cross drew his weapon, advanced 2 deliberate steps, hurled racially charged threats, then had his gun ripped away in an instant. In those fleeting seconds, America was jolted. This was not a spur-of-the-moment reflex, but a calculated act of violence and hate. Commentators dubbed it a declaration of war, because nothing about it seemed accidental. It was intimidation, born of deep-seated prejudice, not fear. Outrage swept the nation. On Twitter, hashtags like "Stop Abuse of Power," "No More Racism," and "Honor Not Violence" trended within hours. Facebook comment threads overflowed with condemnations of "power gone unchecked," targeting not just Cross himself, but the system that allowed a man with a history of racial animus to carry a firearm at all. Military analysts and veterans weighed in, arguing that this was a long-planned test of honor, not a breakdown of discipline. Mainstream media seized on the contrast, footage of a high-ranking officer standing unflinching before a raised weapon, palm resting lightly on a flag-draped coffin. Anchors highlighted how that single image shattered every excuse. If authority is measured by force, they asked, then why did a general's silence speak louder than a drawn sidearm? Editorial boards called for stricter psychological screening and tighter weapons controls in law enforcement, while a handful of defenders pointing to orders or stress were swiftly drowned out by the roar of public condemnation. Politicians joined the chorus. Legislative proposals surfaced to overhaul background checks and mandate de-escalation training. Even staunch defenders of law and order conceded that when power isn't held accountable by discipline, it becomes nothing more than a tool of personal vendetta. In the end, those 11 seconds broke through every veneer of excuse. They forced the nation to acknowledge a deeper truth. Genuine authority rests not in the barrel of a gun but in the restraint to choose silence over violence. And that revelation, etched in high definition against the stillness of a military funeral, became the message America could not ignore. Even after the showdown at the cemetery, the shadow of Kandahar clung to Vincent Cross like an unhealed wound. Classified files revealed that, amid the chaos of a hailstorm of bullets, comrades cried for help in the rubble, yet Cross chose to hunker down behind the Humvee's armor, blaming a broken radio for his inaction. Meanwhile, a future legend dashed into the crossfire, hoisting each wounded soldier to safety and dragging them clear of death's door. 3 men fell that day, one silence answering the cries. And Cross returned without so much as a word of remorse, if nothing more than a technical glitch had occurred. Not long afterward, Henry Wallace, armed with GPS logs and battlefield reports, formally recommended Cross's expulsion for dishonorable conduct unworthy of an officer, but political pressure and congressional friendships smothered that verdict. Instead of a court-martial, Cross was quietly awarded an honorable discharge, a leniency that stoked his humiliation into a burning grudge. In his mind, the man who saved him had never truly grasped the weight of real authority. From that moment, the seed of vengeance took root in Cross's heart. He did not seek forgiveness or redemption. He craved proof that he alone deserved the mantle of leadership, where honor and power are not granted on paper, but defended through decisive action. Night after night, memories of his cowardice in Kandahar fanned the flames of his fury. That festering resentment forged his resolve to brandish his gun and his rank as instruments of forced respect. And then, when the bombs fell and bullets cracked, that hatred propelled Cross to level his weapon at the unmoving figure before him, treating it as the ultimate reckoning for the man he blamed for his disgrace. He had rehearsed the moment meticulously, training on a shadowy silhouette until each muscle knew its role. Every gesture at the funeral was the culmination of a vengeance play nurtured in distant dunes. It was no momentary lapse of panic. Kandahar had sown the blade of hate, and the funeral merely offered Cross the stage to carry out the sentence he deemed righteous. Yet in the great silence of Wallace's refusal to flinch, Cross glimpsed his true mistake. Silence is not weakness but a weapon honed sharper than any bullet. That instant ignited a new cycle where past and present collided, and where glory and hatred were finally measured against the final note of the bugle, continuing the shockwave set off by that 11-second video. Vincent Cross stepped into the courtroom with handcuffs clamped to his wrists, his gaze still burning with defiance. The gallery packed with reporters, officials, and civilians held its breath, all awaiting a historic moment. The first time an officer would face the harshest federal charges, not for firing a shot, but for the intent itself, his threatening posture and actions. The trial began with footage of the funeral projected onto a large screen, Cross drawing his pistol, striding forward 2 deliberate steps, roaring into the hushed ranks of honor guards, and then, in the blink of an eye, having his weapon expertly wrested from his hand. Next came the Kandahar video replayed in full. As comrades fell under fire, Cross had cowered behind an armored vehicle, while the young general had vaulted into the line of fire to carry them to safety. A hush fell over the courtroom as the prosecutor read aloud from the indictment. It is not the bullet that constitutes the crime, but the intent to aim that weapon at a superior officer. When the defense attorney rose to argue, he was under extreme stress, never intended to shoot. The judge pounded the gavel and cut him off. This court does not accept psychological duress as a defense. Brandishing a firearm to intimidate during a sacred memorial ceremony is a profound breach of military discipline and honor. The violent intent alone warrants conviction for illegal use of a weapon. Then the colonel commanding the honor guard took the stand. His voice resonated with sober authority. We stood in silence to honor the fallen. When we heard the shout and saw the muzzle flash, we knew immediateless was no accident. It was a premeditated act of aggression. Now, witnesses nodded as investigators introduced an old audio transcript from the DI 3rd Division device. If he shows up today, he'll act. Just stay still and let the tension consume him. Now, Cross's brow furrowed, panic flickered in his eyes as the judge prepared to pronounce sentence. Rising to his full height, she intoned without mercy. The court finds Vincent Cross guilty of unlawfully using a weapon and threatening another's life. Despite no physical injury, his actions demonstrate a willful intent to kill. I hereby sentence him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Lan. A stunned silence rippled through the courtroom. The verdict rang out like a legal decree. Violent intent is punishable by law. This landmark ruling delivered justice for Lieutenant Commander Cassandra H. Reed and affirmed that in a society governed by rule of law, aiming a gun even without firing demands the gravest consequences. Building on the echoes of that landmark trial, the image of the general silently placing his bare hand on the flag-draped casket has transcended a single moment. It has become the defining symbol of the Wallace Protocol, the absolute ban on drawing a weapon during any solemn ceremony. Almost immediately, the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security drafted new legislation explicitly stating, in any memorial space, formal ceremony, or place of worship, firearms must remain holstered unless there is an imminent threat to life. This rule was swiftly integrated into the core curriculum for all senior officer training programs, police academies, military academies, and security services alike. Every class now reviews that crucial 11-second clip and reflects on Dalton's words, "He who readies his gun fears the man who doesn't even need to lift a finger." Lecture halls shifted focus overnight from tactical prowess to the discipline of restraint. Cadets are now placed in high-stress simulations where silence itself is the weapon, using eye contact and posture to de-escalate rather than squeezing a trigger. National security textbooks devote an entire chapter to analyzing those fateful 11 seconds, accompanied by discussion prompts. If you were holding the gun, at what exact moment would you lower it? Or, how can silence create the space that forces an adversary to stand down? Thousands of trainees have shared images of the Wallace Formation honor guards frozen in place, embodying unbreakable discipline. Videos of that serene tableau beneath the fluttering flag have reshaped public perception. Pausing is not a loss of authority but its highest assertion. Some commanders have even annotated it in their service records as proof of professional ethos. Civic society embraced the movement, too. At memorials across the country, officials, volunteers, and everyday citizens observe a 1-minute silent ceno only to honor the fallen, but to practice responsible stillness amid daily chaos. Nonprofits fighting violence have adopted the Wallace Protocol in their campaigns, urging schools and businesses to embed accountable silence in their codes of conduct. Gradually, America's culture of power shifted from shoot first to reflect first. Before that, hammer's weight leaves the holster. One must consider the broader human context. From a mere 11-second moment, the nation has redefined courage, not by the roar of a weapon, but by the chilling quiet of discipline and respect. The Wallace Protocol endures etched into every lecture, every textbook, and every heart that witnessed the formidable power of silence wielded with responsibility. This story shows us that the greatest challenge is not the gunfire at our ears, but the moment of silence heavy enough to make a would-be aggressor hesitate. It is the power of inner discipline and the invisible unity among those who stand for what is right. The message to each viewer is, which side will you choose, gunfire or responsible silence? Share your personal viewpoint on this confrontation. Do you agree or disagree with resolving it through silent authority? How many instances of power abuse do you think restraint can prevent in the future? And when do you believe racial discrimination will truly end 2050? 2100. Or even later? We invite you to comment your predictions below, along with any solutions you think should be implemented to erase prejudice. It is precisely the frank and diverse voices of the community that will create the momentum for laws, culture, and education to advance together, opening the door to a society without racial divides, where everyone is respected and safe.